Welcome to A Dose of Feel Good. I'm your host, Whitney Bischoff, and today we are talking about your story having power and the joy, too. You can see full show notes at doseoffeelgood.my.canva.site. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hey, y'all. We are here at episode 20. We are living, thriving, doing our best life over here. Today's topic is about how much power your story has and the importance of celebrating the joy in our lives too. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little nervous for today's episode. We're going to really dig into my own personal story, which I'm a pretty open book from like the outside looking in. But to actually tell your story and everything you've gone through can be a little scary and intimidating. So I appreciate that y'all are on this journey with me here today. I think it's super important to remind ourselves of our story and the things we've gone through, that we've risen above. We're still here and doing really incredible things, but there are a lot of things that make us who we are, and sometimes we hide that from the outside, and it looks like we have it all together, and we don't. We're all just trying to figure it out as we go, but I know, at least for me, I am the hardest on myself. I have really high expectations for myself, often higher than anyone else is going to have for me. But then that comes with being extra critical of who I am, the things I've gone through, what I could have or should have done differently. And so it gets me then to this place that, like, if I am to tell my story, who's going to judge? What are they going to say, right? Like all of these kind of scary things, because it is vulnerable. It's our own experience that we are portraying to somebody else, but they'll never really understand because it's complex. There's a lot of different pieces that go into our story and make us who we are. And while everyone has their own journey, how we maybe navigate our lives might be helpful for somebody else. I think when we get stuck in these moments, we don't even know which way to turn. And so the more that we tell our stories, it might give somebody a clue of maybe how to navigate things that they're experiencing in their own journey. I think it also, at least for me, reminds me that even in the struggles, I'm not doing life alone. I think it's easy when we remind ourselves of all the joy. It's often surrounded by people, but in our dark, lonely moments of the hard things we go through, there are still people that show up. And so the more we can tell ourselves that, we know that we're not alone in the struggle. But I think we get stuck often as well when we tell our stories of all of the hard times, because they teach us a lot. They teach us how we can grow and do better, or maybe navigate things differently in the future, or make us who we are. But the majority of our lives are not spent in those really hard moments. There are so many joyful moments, even amidst the hard things. And so the more that we share our stories, we can show that there is really that balance, even in the hardest of times, where we know there is still joy. And so when we tell our stories, being able to really celebrate those moments too is really important. And I think it's also important as we talk about like how to tell our stories, what that looks like. For anyone else, it really is the highlight reel, right? Like our authentic story is ours, and we can try to explain this is how I navigated this piece, or this is how it felt, or the emotions. No one will quite understand, because they're just getting that highlight reel. They're just kind of looking in from the outside rather than experiencing it in that moment. And so just remember that when you hear of other people's stories, that it is really vulnerable and real to them of what they've experienced. And so to highlight this, I am going to try to share my story a little bit. And obviously it's not going to be super in depth. I, the other day, talked about one little nugget of my story that I had actually never shared, of like the intricacies of it. And it was scary. And so I'm a little nervous, like I said, but I think it is really important, especially because, at least for me, I hear a lot of times of, "You're so strong," lol. And while, yes, I agree, but there are moments, right, that like helped to get me there. And so I think having that understanding of where that goes through, and just a reminder that this really is my highlight reel. And a little disclaimer for folks. Most people, I think that, again, I'm a relatively open book of what I've gone through, experienced. But most people know pieces. They definitely don't know the whole story or the whole truth or all of the ins and outs. And so I am going to put that out for the world here today. But just know that it's also not the entire story, right? That highlight reel. But we're just gonna dig into it and roll with it. And I'm gonna go way back to my young days. I like to think of this also as an exercise called Life Roadmap, which I'll talk through here in a bit. So no, like I put in the work to really write down what this looks like because there's so many intricate pieces. But I often go back to like my first memory when I was very, very little. My sister was born when I was 3. And I distinctly remember like holding her. She was like, I think like 4 pounds, something ounces. She was tiny. And calling her my little baby feather. And her name is Heather after that exact moment. And I think that's really cool and impactful. And me and my sister are super, super close. But it was just her, I, and then our parents, my mom and dad. And I always say we had like what felt like the picture perfect white picket fence house. Like that's how it really felt growing up. And I didn't have a care in the world. And that could have been maybe just because I was so little, didn't maybe know any better. But my world got turned upside down when I was 7. We lost my dad in an airline accident. He had his own airplane. My uncle was with him. And he traveled a lot for work and he loved flying. We actually moved closer to the airport so that he could be closer to his airplane. And like he would take me up and I'd be in the cockpit at age 7. So he loved it. He actually left on his, or was coming back on his birthday. The day before was my mom and dad's anniversary. And there was just this joke that he was going to get an anniversary gift for my mom. And I remember waking up the next morning and there were all these people in my house. We were doing a big surprise party for when he came back. And then all of a sudden 2 National Guard folks showed up at our front door. And that was definitely the pivotal moment. I remember everything inside and out. And I don't know if it's because I was the older sibling or what, but just all of the compounding grief that came with that. And my mom was never the same afterwards. It was just the 3 of us girls trying to navigate life. And she struggled. Like, she lost the love of her life. And it definitely had an impact. I had to grow up very quickly because of, my mom trying to figure out how to navigate that grief. And I can't even imagine that as an adult. I'm like, I don't want to know what that was like. But it definitely wasn't easy on any of us. And, she was lonely. She entered into an abusive relationship, which anyone in that space, like there's just so much trauma involved and just a lot of fear. Honestly, of just the day-to-day, not knowing what was going to happen, XYZ. But there were also a lot of really joyful moments. So my mom became an alcoholic after my dad passed. And she was super amazing. Like, she was so fun. And so whenever she wasn't drinking, it was like she was this whole different person. And there was so much joy. There was a lot of dancing in our house, ridiculous things, jokingly. Like, we were all just super weird. And I loved those moments. Those are the ones that I really hold on to. But it wasn't easy to navigate. And my freshman year of high school, I got to a really low of like, is this how every day of my life is going to look like? Just from the constant fear and being in survival mode. I then lost a friend to suicide early in our high school career. And this was right after my mom's boyfriend also had an attempt. And it was just a lot of compounding things. I experienced a sexual assault shortly after that, and it got to this point that I just didn't even know how to navigate, or it was just like one thing after another, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So I did actually attempt to take my life like 3 times within like 3 months of each other, and my school counselors knew. I had one friend that was fantastic. She's literally the reason that I'm here. But, you know, with my mom trying to navigate all of her things, it was often like, oh, you're just stressed. And so I did not get professional help probably until the last like 2 years. And so I had to learn how to navigate and find ways through that moment. And while it was definitely really hard, I also had some really fabulous things. That's when I got involved in theater, which honestly totally transformed my life, just with positive adults there, kind of giving me a purpose, the support system. I found Jesus, which gives me a purpose just to spread light, and be here every day when it's hard. I have a place to go. And then I had a school counselor, Tim McGowan, who just always showed up and would show me that I have more to offer, even if I didn't quite understand that. And that's literally the purpose of why I do what I do each and every day, is really to carry that forward. I've been married 11 years now, but Chad and I met then our senior year of high school, and just having that constant to kind of navigate life with can be really, really helpful. So there were a lot of like joyful moments following that, and I'm glad I can look back and really find those and see that there were so many people walking along this journey with me. Then went off to college, my sophomore year of college. Then, my mom ended up passing as well. Just the ongoing alcoholism really took a toll on her body, and she just didn't want to fight anymore. And I could understand that as a 19-year-old. But that then had its own compounding grief. My sister hadn't graduated high school, so trying to figure out, am I going back to school? Where is she going to go? Packing up a house, just so many pieces. And I was definitely one to just mask and just cope with the problem and keep going. But I went back to school. I was like, I'm proving that I have a place that I need to be. And I know that's what my mom would have wanted now. And now I work in higher ed. I'm surrounded by fabulous people. My students remind me all the time of the impact that I'm having, and I can genuinely see that. I have real, authentic friendships that they show up. Even if we're not talking about anything, they show up, and I can be the real me. And it might have taken to age 30 to actually recognize that, but also knowing that like I have a purpose for being here. And I'm super quirky and weird. But sometimes people need that, right? So I have this purpose to help people see that their story matters, that they can do hard things, and helping to empower them to really understand that and rise to that potential is super fulfilling. And so I say all the time, like, yes, I've had to struggle through all of these things, and now, without going super in depth, now I have a ton of health things on top of that. But I just know that people also go through hard things and they might not ever share that story. And so I think it's helpful to know that while I look like I have it all together, I don't. I've just learned from the things that life has thrown at me and have used them to really live an authentic life that helps people. I think this is helpful to talk about telling our stories and what that looks like in practice, because life, I think, throws the hardest things at people to show us what we are capable of. And we're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. It also shows us that we truly are not alone, that we are all just humans trying to figure it out, and why not figure it out together and learn from each other? We don't need to duplicate things that people are just now discovering, right? Like, learn from each other. And I think that's the beauty of being able to tell our stories and really understanding that the hard things we go through often overshadow the joy. But it shouldn't. Like, there are all these glimmers of reminders, even when I was going through the hardest of things, whether that's in people, places, things, looking back on things, that I have one little box of like all of my mementos from when I was little, and there was so much joy. And so not getting stuck in those hard things and reminding ourselves that there's so much streams of light that we have been able to encounter and experience throughout our lives. And in order to do that, we do need to process the good, process the things that were kind of gross. But being able then to share how we got through that and being amazed and proud of ourselves in those moments. And even now, really understanding that we can inspire other people to really navigate through those hard things they're experiencing, even if they're not telling us that they're experiencing those things. And there's just so much power in that. So our call to action, so I don't take too much time. And again, this is a very brief overview, but it just helps kind of to show that there are things that we all go through, but there are also so many beautiful things that we go through as well. So what can you take from this? I don't want it to just be, oh, Whitney told her story and she's so inspirational and blah, 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 which I do think I am, and not in a conceited way. It's celebrating those things because it has been hard, but I don't want it to be all about me, right? Like, your story has power as well, but it is really hard to share it. It's really scary to share it. So where do you even start? And I would highly recommend writing down almost like this timeline of events in your life. Those pivotal moments, both the things that were really hard, but also those things that were really, really good. Like, what shapes you to be you? How did you get there? And really mapping that out almost on like a timeline of those major events. I think it's also important as you do that, right? Like, we can get really stuck on those hard things. Find those joyful things too, and understand how much those joyful moments impacted you just as much as those challenges. And then I always think of this as like a roadmap exercise. Find one or two trusted people, share your story. And again, it's not going to be every single in and out, but it is going to be, that highlight reel, and helping to do that with people that you trust can make it more comfortable, and not that you're, looking in on your life, but really sharing and knowing that your story is powerful and can be powerful for others. And I think it's also really important to know, especially with the hard things, and as maybe you choose to do this exercise and think about what it means to tell your story, know that sometimes it does take professional help, counselors, therapists, to really navigate through some of those hard things and how it has impacted you. And so I highly encourage you to take that time to do that, especially if it's really hard and there are things that maybe you haven't processed. And I'm right there with y'all. I was joking with a coworker the other day of like, yeah, maybe I should get back into therapy and figure some of these things out. And so just know it is a process, but it is okay to ask for help and navigate through those things so that you can be your best self. So that's it for today. I went a little over, so hopefully y'all hung in there with me. I didn't want to rush it, nor should you when you're telling your story or even listening to others. But I hope it's helpful, and I hope you feel inspired to know that you and what you bring to the table has power and purpose, and that you are impacting people. And I hope you just know how special and important you are, and that you are reminded of that today.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you are feeling ready to conquer the week and let your impact ripple out to the world around you. Let's connect on Instagram and Threads at Dose of Feel Good Podcast. If you're loving the podcast, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Until next time, share your own dose of feel good and never underestimate the power of positivity.